What happened to Jimmy Gracey, the 20-year-old American college student who vanished after a night out in Barcelona, has been found dead in the water. He was last seen at a popular nightclub and then seemingly disappeared. Investigators say new clues from the early morning hours may finally reveal what really happened along the dark coastline. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Stewart. Jimmy Gracey. He was a beloved son, the oldest of five, a fraternity brother who is known for helping others. But now authorities in Spain are trying to understand how he could die under such mysterious circumstances after a night out overseas on spring break. These are some new images we have in from the Associated Press of authorities working in the area where Gracey's body was reportedly found early Thursday evening. A worker at a marina, according to Fox News, reportedly spotted Gracey's body, then waved over police, who then blocked the area off to investigate. Now, you might remember earlier in the week, there was a local media outlet, El Periodico, which put out a report that police were investigating the possibility of foul play. Today, on Friday, police have now ruled out the possibility of foul play, at least at this point, and it appears, reportedly, that Gracey's death was accidental. The New York Times has a confidential source close to the investigation who used that term, saying that everything at this point is pointing in the direction of an accident. But there are still questions, and until we have a confirmed cause of death, detectives need to investigate every possible angle, even though his death may not be a murder. Again, there's still a lot of questions here. There's some new information also coming in today on Friday about what surveillance cameras show that are helping authorities piece together how Gracey ended up in the water. Before we get to that, let's break down the timeline that we know of at this point. Jimmy Gracey, he was in Barcelona visiting friends who were studying abroad. Gracey was there on spring break from the University of Alabama. He's originally from Chicago. And on Monday night, the group that he was with, they decided that they were going to head out and go to a popular nightclub in Barcelona. This is a picture of Jimmy from that night out, according to his mom. Now, the nightclub is called Shoko, and it's right on the water in Barcelona. Very popular place, not a sketchy place. It was actually ranked one of the top nightclubs in the world. So this is a place known to a lot of people. And when you look at pictures on the inside, where people are shoulder to shoulder, it is unclear at this point just how many people were in Jimmy's group and whether they met anyone at the nightclub that night. Somehow, as the night continued on, Gracey gets separated from his group. And it's unclear if maybe Gracey decided to stay longer and people were headed back home, or something happened that got him separated from the people who he came with. The last time he was seen was around 3 a.m. on Tuesday. His group, they're able to get back to the Airbnb where they were staying. Jimmy's mom posted to Facebook her son was missing, and she posted images of him in hopes that someone would know where he was. Members of Jimmy's family flew to Barcelona this week to help with this search. There were Facebook groups for American students studying abroad, sharing Jimmy's image across the internet. There were missing poster signs up in the area of Barcelona where Jimmy went missing. Now, this nightclub, it is located right on the water in Barcelona. It doesn't appear that it's in an area with heavy waves, though, even though it's right along the beach. It's a place that looks relatively peaceful. There's a marina, docks, a jetty, and it's also a place where there are cameras on the water. This is a screen grab of a webcam from Skyline Webcams of the marina where Jimmy's body was reportedly found near. There were two big clues that law enforcement had before Jimmy's body was found, and one was his cell phone. Police reportedly have it, and they took it off someone who was arrested, according to Jimmy's family. And we still don't know the circumstances surrounding that person's arrest. How did this person get Jimmy's phone? How did law enforcement find it? And how did they know that this is a phone that would be connected to the missing American? Now, the other big piece of evidence was Jimmy's wallet, which was reportedly found floating in the water in the hours before his body was discovered. It's unclear what Jimmy's cause of death is and what a toxicology test will show. There is some new information coming in on this Friday. There's a media outlet called El País in Spain, which is reporting that security camera footage shows Jimmy walking alone towards a dock area. And reportedly, this camera footage shows him falling into the water. The marina where his body was reportedly found, it's adjacent to the nightclub. That footage has not been released to the public, and police in Spain have not commented or confirmed the information that this El País media outlet is putting out there. There's no question that this story is every parent's worst nightmare. And in the wake of Jimmy's body being found, Jimmy's family released this statement saying, quote, "We are so grateful for the kindness and concern that has been shown for our family during this incredibly difficult time. We have made the decision to pause media interviews at this time to focus on being together and caring for one another. Thank you for respecting our privacy and holding our family in your thoughts and prayers. We will share updates if and when we're able." Now, sadly, this is not the first case where a family has been put through such heartbreaking uncertainty like this case. You might remember last year when American college student Sudiksha Kananki went missing on spring break when she was in the Dominican Republic. She vanished after she went to the beach with a boy at an all-inclusive resort in the early hours of the morning. That boy was detained by Dominican authorities, but he was released and allowed to return home to the U.S., and authorities believe that Kananki's death was an accident. According to ABC News, authorities say they believe that she drowned, but her body was never found. Now, this case might also remind people of the case of Riley Strain, the college student who went missing after a night out with his fraternity brothers in Nashville in 2024. Strain's body was found in a river 2 weeks later after he went missing, and his cause of death was determined to be drowning and ethanol intoxication. His blood alcohol level was nearly 3 times the legal limit. Now, his cause of death was accidental, but in March of last year, his family filed a civil lawsuit naming Strain's fraternity and several of its members. That suit accused Strain's fraternity brothers of pressuring Riley into a night of drinking and then not taking care of him after he was so intoxicated. A judge ruled against the family in December of last year. Now, it is obviously too soon to know whether there's any sort of civil action in this case involving Jimmy Gracey, but this situation is just another example of a family left with so much heartbreak that would be so difficult to imagine. Jimmy's brother posted this on Instagram with this picture saying, quote, "To the best big brother anyone could ask for. Jimmy, you were such a great role model for me, and you taught me a lot. I miss you so much, and I know everyone else does too. I miss playing catch with you in the backyard. I miss playing against you on Madden. I miss swimming at lake with you during the summer. I wish I could have just one more day with you, one more call, one more brother-to-brother conversation. I miss you more than anyone can understand. I know you're with God right now. Please watch over us. I love you so much. Rest easy." Joining us now to talk more about this case is forensic death investigator, professor of applied forensics at Jacksonville State University, and the host of Body Bags, which you can now watch on YouTube, Joseph Scott Morgan. Great to have you here as always. Just thinking of this family today, what a nightmare. We're starting to get some information when it comes to what may have happened. We know the body's been found. Police have ruled out foul play, and they did that pretty quickly. What are some of the questions that you still have at this point?
Well, here's the problem, and maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm getting the timeline mixed up here. But one of the things that I can tell you that I've never done as a death investigator at a scene is rule out foul play before an autopsy is performed. That statement was being made like immediately upon recovery of the remains.
Mm-hmm.
First off, anybody that's at the scene is not qualified to make that statement. You need to have a forensic pathologist make that statement, okay? Because you have no idea. That's to the exclusion of anything that might be occurring internally, and how can you assess that at the scene? So I think that's a big part of it. Also, we don't know from a toxicological standpoint what he may have had in his system. Everything from blood, urine, bile, vitreous. Oh, and by the way, gastric content, because that's going to have to be assessed as well. So that's kind of what you're looking at, and trying to understand what the dynamics were with this young man being found in the water. What happened prior to that? It's one thing to find the body, and I'm glad that they've recovered him, but I want to know what happened in the minutes and also the hours prior to him, being at this club and then winding up in the water.
And I want to be careful so I don't speculate on this, but when and some things might be getting lost in translation because like the
Yep.
term foul play here in the United States um, can mean one thing,
Yep.
and then in Spain it could mean another, right? Like when they say like if according to this media outlet El País, if there is actual video of showing him walking alone on this dock and he falls into the water, um, and they say, well, then that rules out foul play. He must have just fallen into the water. Like that doesn't mean that we don't know what was in his system. Like we don't
No.
know how someone just walks down a dock and maybe it was dark and he falls in. I don't know, but it seems like to rule out foul play, you're saying every single thing that happened leading up to that moment. It's not like someone pushed him into the water, maybe, but there's still the possibility that I'll say not the possibility, but like we don't know what was going on that night. Like we
Yeah,
don't we
maybe
don't know
maybe
what was in his
maybe
system.
maybe in Spain they've uncovered some kind of magic key to investigations, where they can look into the future and see these things and interpret them in the immediate. Investigations take some time, Chris.
Yeah.
As you well know, I mean, you've been covering cases now for a long, long time, and there is a process to everything, and it's methodical. That's why we're based in science. It is crime science. It is forensic science, and these answers are not microwavable. It happens. It happens over a period of time, and you have to go step by step. That's why I have a real problem when people start making comments like this and you've got all this peripheral static that we're hearing about. I mean, my lord, the kid's cell phone is found in someone else's possession, and they're actually saying that there was an arrest affected
Mhm.
that recovered the cell phone. How is that explained? His wallet is not on his person. I've worked a lot of deaths where we took bodies out of the water, and many times, articles like wallets become even more adherent inside of the pockets of the deceased. Was the wallet pulled out and then rifled through and kind of tossed away? What's missing from the wallet? Was his ID there? Uh, Credit cards? Was he known to carry any kind of cash? Euros? They use euros in Spain. Was there American currency that he had? And where's his passport? I want to know that. Was his passport on his person? I don't know about you. When I travel internationally, dude, I don't go anywhere without my passport. It's going to be with me. Um, so there's a lot more, I think, to try to understand here than, kind of making some kind of knee jerk assessment very, very quickly. The family is owed more information than this and it needs to be backed up with science.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And on the science part of it, his body, he was last seen 3 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday, and then as everybody gets up the next morning on Tuesday, where's Jimmy? And then that's when this search begins, and then his body is recovered. It was early Thursday evening in Barcelona. How when it comes to a toxicology test and trying to
Mm-hmm.
figure out what was in his system, like, can you still, after a body's been in water potentially for that long period of time, like, can you still do a toxicology test and be able to get an understanding of what was in someone's system when they died?
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, we could even extend it further than that. 2 days is not a very long period of time from the perspective of forensic toxicology. That's easily accomplished. It all depends, and I'm wondering as well, Chris, about their turnaround on tox. How motivated are they? To get these results back, because in America we will do what's referred to as a standard forensic panel where we're looking for any kind of drugs of abuse. Okay, anything that might be out there, everything from opiates to cocaine metabolite to amphetamines and all this sort of thing. And I would imagine it would kind of be the same thing. But one thing I'd be very curious about, are they going to screen for things like date rape drugs? You begin to think about rehibanol and that whole category of things that unfortunately we've seen over the years, that we've had drinks in bars that have been laced. And this
Yeah.
is not new territory we're covering here. People have heard this over and over again. But it's a complicated matter because it's not like the family can run down, for instance, they're from the Chicagoland area. All right. So it's not like they can go down to the Cook County Medical Examiner's office and have a conversation with the forensic pathologist. Their child, their child is in Spain. All right. So who's going to advocate for them? And we do know this because over the years we've had a lot of our citizens that have died abroad. And with your point of contact through the State Department, generally there is a point of contact adjacent to the State Department where you have an FBI agent. It's like a resident agent that's there. And Chris, I got to tell you, I'm really hoping that individual is going to be on site. They're going to be on site with this child's remains. I'm calling him a child. He's a grown man, but with his remains there that can advocate for the family. Because I'm going to want to know more than merely their comments. Okay. I want to know that there is still toxicology, which the FBI has done this in the past, that there's sample that we could have brought back to the state and we can analyze it here in our country. Also, tissue samples. I'm going to be very interested in that. I want to know that the family is going to have access to that. And again, all I got to do is just cite Natalie Holloway. I mean, you throw that out there, and it's kind of a similar situation in the sense that she's abroad and she's vacationing. Okay. And that went on for a long, long time. And obviously, Aruba is not Spain, but Spain ain't America. And so we have a particular way of doing things here. And I'm just hoping that there can be somebody kind of guide this along, maybe from the FBI, that can kind of shepherd this process along so the family's going to get satisfaction.
Yeah, and that's the thing is no matter what the answer is, and it's already kind of gotten to this point that nobody wanted. Your stomach really sank yesterday when you hear what it appeared to when his body was found. When it comes to the cause of death, I mean, how soon, if it's drowning because his body was found in the water, what more can be done to understand, okay, if drowning is the cause of death, we're making sure that all these, other factors may not have contributed to that drowning. So you have drowning at the top, like what else could be a possibility along with drowning if that's kind of the headline cause of death that would come out of an autopsy?
Yeah, the headline here obviously would in fact be drowning. That's something that we can assess in the immediate at autopsy. We're going to look at the lungs. We'll actually look at the inner ear, which is something that we do with drowning. That's kind of standard fare. The problem is that how did he drown? Okay. Did he drown because he was inebriated and he happened to fall in? And this goes to circumstantial evidence. Or was he inebriated and he drowned because somebody purposed to do harm to him? And drowning was just easy to facilitate because you're around this large body of water. It's dark. He's disoriented in this. Was he slipped something and then pushed off of a dock? And any of us that have been in the water when the sun is going down, or Lord have mercy, when it's dark outside, you get disoriented very, very quickly. And we still don't understand, because we're hearing things like he was at a dock, he was on the beach, they had videography, they're seeing him with somebody, they're not seeing him with somebody.
Yeah.
And all of these circumstantial events surrounding this just further complicate the case. And, again, maybe lost in translation. But I'm hoping that we're going to have clarity on all of these matters. It's the sum total of the investigation. It's not merely the autopsy or the toxicology. It's all of the circumstantial information. And now it would seem as though we've got a lot of data that is coming into us, and it's not necessarily data that's backed up from an investigative standpoint. We've got journalists that are saying things, and we've heard 2 or 3 different types of scenarios that have been spoken about in the media, the foreign press. So I want to know truly what the facts are, and I'm hoping that we'll arrive at some kind of conclusion.
Yeah, and because, earlier this week, there was the report that came out from one newspaper saying that, foul play was a possibility. Then it was quickly ruled out even before the body was found, which, what led to that report? Now the report is that he was alone walking along a dock. And then you just wonder, what were the circumstances surrounding him being separated from his group? You're in a foreign country, Barcelona is a place. I mean, there's probably, you'll walking down the street, you'll see other American students on spring break. I mean, Barcelona is one of those places where, so many people study abroad and go
Oh
there
yeah.
for spring break. And I'm sure that nightclub too, like it's, not, it's an international city, but there's probably, it felt probably like home in some aspects of it. But how does someone get separated from their group like that? What were the circumstances surrounding it? And then what do you make of the fact that, so he goes missing on Tuesday and then they find his body at a dock at a marina, I believe,
Yeah.
or in an area where, like, this is a very popular part of Barcelona where his body was found. What do you make of just the fact that it took, what was that, 48, 72 hours for
Yeah.
the body to be found in an area where it seems like there was a lot of people?
Yeah. Well, many times, and not to be too overly graphic,
Sure.
but many times when people go into the water, their bodies do in fact sink. Okay, and then as a result of changes that take place in the body post mortem, they'll reemerge. You've got that factor that's involved, and again, you're not talking about a lot of time here from a post mortem standpoint. All right, I'm talking about from our perspective as forensic scientists. The other thing is it's in kind of a protected area. This is a harbored area. It looks like to me, at least from what I'm seeing, but you're still having to fight tide rise and fall as well, and that's impacted as well. So you could put something, say, on the surface here, where things are drawn out of the harbor. I've seen this actually happen, and then you have things that are kind of contained or retained inside the harbor. It's kind of resistant to the tides and the draw of the tides. I think that that's something that they need to look at, and it's something that we would do. Having started my career in New Orleans, it's something we did a lot, trying to understand tides and how it impacts where the bodies wind up. Also, when you go subsurface in water, if there's debris in that immediate area, we see that down here in the South, even, don't we? With some of our big lakes, recreational lakes, where people will be hung up in debris underwater. And maybe the tide moves in, the body releases, and it floats to the top. So how was he actually visualized? Who is it that put eyes on him to begin with? At what time of day did this occur? And it looked like, the dive team did a fantastic job. They went out to do the recovery. You can see that it's an all hands on deck kind of thing. They're actually searching for him. It's not like they've blown this off or anything like that.
No.
But they are putting forth their efforts, to try to find this young man. But it's everything that happens after that. How is this going to be interpreted by their forensic professionals and also by their law enforcement investigators? Again, the totality of all of the evidence and the circumstances, I think, is going to come into play. I don't think this is going to be leaving out of the news cycle anytime soon, simply because of all of the static that's being created and these multiple narratives that are out there. Someone has to step in and clarify. And I think that clarity here, particularly for the family, this isn't about me or you. This is truly about the family and who's going to advocate for them. Because what a desperate position to be in. You're already missing your child, right? You don't know where he is, and then suddenly, as of yesterday, he's deceased. So who's going to advocate for them in this foreign country? I hope somebody steps up.
Yeah, me too. And, I don't, certainly know the science part of it like you do, but I feel like from a media relations part of it, police have been very tight-lipped with the official lines. But then, and if you want to keep things close to the vest, that's fine. I feel like in the US, like the FBI does a really good job of that, where like they're only talking like when information comes out. But also with the FBI, you don't see a ton of leaks from the FBI on a lot of cases. And here, it's like in the local media reports, even from the New York Times, I have it up here. And it like the line was saying something like, a source says all indications are pointing to foul play being, or all indications are pointing to this being an accident. And it's like, if you're not going to make statements publicly, like, but you have people leaking lines like that to the media, that creates some of the confusion that people have, because then you look at that and you're like, okay, well, they know it was an accident. Why is that? And then there's all these differing reports. So sometimes news conferences go a long way.
Well, I got to tell you, I don't want to continue coming back to Natalie Holloway, but there are other cases like this. One of the big things you're fighting here, and you kind of addressed it just a second ago, Barcelona is a destination location, right? So yeah, it's got a university and all these sorts of things, but what's their life's blood? It's tourism.
Sure.
And so anything that is going to give a black eye to that industry, they're not going to be, they don't want to paint a bad picture of the environment. It'd be real easy to kind of blame the victim, I think, or to not put everything out on the table so that everybody can understand the dynamics. They don't, they're not going to sit out there and talk about the number of pickpockets they have in the area. They're not going to talk about how Americans and other foreigners that show up there are profiled by predatory criminals, because we stand out in a crowd, obviously. All right, when we show up, we dress different, obviously, we speak differently. And if you get somebody that's inebriated, which we can only assume that he's a college kid, he's going to a club. Now, I don't know, maybe he's a teetotaler, I have no idea, but odds would be that he would imbibe, perhaps. Well, if you're walking down the sidewalk, you're going to be an easy target for somebody that's an opportunist. They're not going to talk about that. Okay, so we have to also kind of understand that perspective as well. That's why I hope that that Jimmy's family is going to be advocated for by our federal government in this case.
Yeah, and I hope too, like, I know it's soapboxing about kind of media relations with law enforcement, but you hope at least that the family is getting information.
Yes.
That they have the information. I mean, certainly all of us in the public who hope that they get that information, we're secondary, very distant second to the importance that they get the information.
Yes, absolutely.
We'll see how this case plays out. Just a tragic, parents' worst nightmare, which can be cliche in these situations to say, but I think it's really fitting, unfortunately, for this story. Joseph Scott Morgan, host of Body Bags, which you can now find on YouTube. Thank you, as always, for being with us on Law&Crime. This is great.
You're quite welcome, Chris.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and you can also find our episodes streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.